Okay, here we go again. See if this works smoothly today. See how long I've got before the puppies decide they need to do something. Okay, so yesterday we left off with the sagas being implemented. So the concept was that the saga would be pulled when we register the tenant and we'd update it with its state. It would not be the responsibility of this particular action to trigger the complete. The stave would decide if the saga considers itself complete. The tenant user was registered now needs to modify for that as well. And the user was verified handler also needs to now pull the saga and update that piece as well. So user was verified would come in when I've confirmed the email address and everything's good there. So we need a iSaga persistence here, right? And we need to inject that. And I'm going to come back over here and add unit tests for some of these. I did correct the tenant, the tenant was registered test before, and I will repeat that effort here afterwards. So var saga equals saga persistence dot retrieve, and we need the tenant registration saga. Unfortunately, I could not avoid having that here. And here now, because we have our tenant user, that's a list. For each var user in tenant user. Let's do it this way first. It's not the best way, but let's just do it as if it's going to retrieve. Oh, that's it. User identifier. Let's make the variable at least meaningful. So that's tenant user identifiers. Let's at least make the code reflect what it's doing. So with our saga, right, saga.handle, and all we're doing here is saga.handle notification. But I don't think that's actually what we wanted to do. User was verified. Yeah, that'd be better. So hold on. Why is that even remotely working? Because I'm getting a solid instance of this. Okay. Gotcha. What I want to do eventually is have something that looks more like this, where I go, I handle tenant was registered, right? I handle tenant user was registered, and I handle user was verified, because then with that I can actually create the when I get to code generation, I could actually create the handlers to receive that event and dispatch it to this because ultimately in each of these handlers, yes, I'm doing extra pieces, but these are well, not in this one, but in this one I'm actually doing something else, right? I'm turning around and doing something. So if I need to listen to this event, it shouldn't be the responsibility of this handler to also update the saga, right? This should be, okay, I'm going to get the user and dispatch it to the registry if necessary. And this, again, this handler is more in line with what the with what that generated code would look like, right? So it's going to get a persistence, and then it's going to retrieve the Saga based upon the identifier and pull it. And this is the sort of code that I don't want to have to write every single time I need to write a Saga. He says not sure if there's actually a second use case coming, but we'll find that out later, right? So now with this, I can handle that notification. I can save that, right? Okay. So again, for an individual user, I could have multiple tenants. I don't know how realistic that is, but I guess I'll find out later. This is going to be interesting, that endpoint that's going to be necessary there. So, and again, I'll make all this stuff its actual own library in GitHub. So this is at least reviewable. Hey, Dota, how are you doing? Good morning. How are things? Good. Move to another file, Saga configuration, add that file. So overnight, I kind of fleshed out the Saga a little bit, made some design decisions. It's not perfect, but it is an implementation, right? So move to another file, iSaga, yeah. That's that. That will that actually will that move to iSaga? There you go. Okay. Okay. Release specific at top. Right. They are both iSaga. We got a Saga and a state. This might not be necessary, but we'll figure that out afterwards. State might just be an object, right? So it might not be necessary to represent it as its own class. That might be a little bit a step too far. Once I start to use it, I'll figure it out. So the idea of this will be I add the service collection extensions. So in the program, I can do add sagas and then use SQL Server, right? And that is an extension of the Saga library, which will register in the collection a pool DB context factory, and then register a SQL Server Saga persistence entity. In here, this will, on retrieve, grab a context. I'm thinking that some of this may need to be asynchronous, but we'll figure that out. Actually, I'm almost certain some of it needs to be async. But yeah. So this will get the required service. So this is injecting the service provider so it can actually create a solid instance of that object. These I'm going to have to add into here to scan and register transient instances of the sagas, and yeah, so this will build an instance, get a context, query for that. If it's null, i.e. we don't have that saga yet, it will actually create one. Actually, that's not good. Saga instance. Yeah, my variable naming here is going to throw me off. I need to change this because I can't explain it quickly. Right? I'm looking at it. I'm like, that's that. What am I talking about when I'm talking about Saga? Yeah, that needs to change. So if we don't have one in the database, we will create one. And otherwise, we will populate the state on the instance that we have, right? And then we return instance, right? So instance is the actual Saga we're going to work with. The Saga is from the database. What is this? This is not a Saga. What is that? We don't. We just need to add it and make sure it's there with an initialized version of the state. It's kind of stored, or is that Saga, right? When we get the service provider to get the instance, that is actually the Saga. This is not. I mean, it's the DB instance of it, but yeah. But anyway, I'll come back around on that afterwards. And then similarly, save, gets a context, and then adds the new Saga, which is wrong. Right? I was just about to come back and review this. So this is actually not different than this. Oh, it's no different than this in reverse, right? Because what it's going to do, and here we go. This is where the conflict will happen. Saga from DB. Saga.orchestration identifier. We'll see if we have one, which we always have because we've created it here. This is another. We can probably remove this. Actually, yeah. Let's make it more efficient. Let's not create a record unless we actually save it. Which, the irony there is the entire purpose of me doing the Saga. The entire focus of me doing the Saga has been so that I don't create records and resources unnecessarily. That was going to create a record and resource unnecessarily. So that's fun. Okay, so and the amusing part here is that the persistence here is going to change based upon whether the Saga is complete. Right? So if it's null, we need to add the new. This is necessary. This is absolutely necessary. So we're going to save the actual object. Let's worry about that first case. If it's not null, i.e. we have one, then we need to do Saga from db.state equals serialize. We're reversing this, right? Saga.state. Right. So we need to actually serialize it and hey, Rambling Geek. No worries. Thank you. Hope you have a great day. Or I hope you're having a great day. It's halfway through, I would imagine. So yeah. I used to tell my boss when he came to my desk and I had a stream up, I'm like, I'm watching other developers or I'm watching gaming. This is how I focus, right? I have the noise on. I can code in chunks. I can look over there. This is how I work. I have had the fortune of having some good bosses along the way. So that's step one, right? The Saga when we save it, it will say, hey, do I already exist in the database? If I don't, then let's create it. If I do, let's update its state in the database and then save the changes. Right. So we introduced the concept of complete, right? So if complete in this instance is if the tenant's registered and the user's registered and the user's verified, then this is a complete Saga, in which case we should publish, right? The challenge here is this needs to be asynchronous, or we have to force it to be synchronous. I'd prefer async. It's not too difficult to introduce. And considering in most cases we will be doing something, we'll be storing something, we'll be sending something, the use of this Saga in general is to make sure that when several things happen at once, we can either notify or distribute something else, right? We might fire another mediator message out of here, right? This might just be a grouping of messages that is representative of several events in mediator. And again, I believe I could use a handler in mediator for this, right? But I feel that putting the type around it, calling it a Saga, explains that this is intended to be a process that could be, it could be a while. This is an out of sequence process that could be a while before it completes, but it's got a state, right? If I do it inside of a regular handler, I've got to store that every time. I've got to jump through hoops to kind of make it look like a Saga without it being a Saga. So all I'm doing here is putting a nice pretty bow on that. And eventually what I want to do is put some code generation in there so it will sit exactly on top of those handlers. And kind of create faux handlers that just forward the event into the Saga itself so that you don't have to worry about that piece. I'm going to rename this state because it doesn't, that's the problem because that's called state. That's why I call it tenant state. Public class state. What is this? Need an object for the sake of an object. It's better to call it state than it is to call it tenant state because it's just redundant calling it tenant state. But then I end up with a bit of a mess. Saga. I don't need that. I don't need to create an instance of the state. Do I? I think I might do. So let's remove that. That becomes that. We can create a new instance of it. It does not have to be of type state, so we can remove that. Right, iSaga persistence, that just has to be class new, so it has to be an object. It can't be, we can't be passing interfaces in here. And what else does that break? That changes that. This is okay. We can still new it up because we've said, hey, we have to be able to create a new one of it. Right. And that just has to be that. Keyword new because it hides property Saga state. hides. Do that. Actually, this gets rid of some of this. Might get rid of some of my generic needs. Again, some of this, I mean, I'm close to getting it working, right? But it's worth just thinking through this API. How do I want to use it? Is it really necessary? Because once I go forward with it and start using it, it's harder to change it. I break more things. All sagas have a state, have an orchestration identifier, and a concept of complete. That is that. And then the actual implementation provides the base object, the what's the right word? There's a name for this. I can't remember the name. But basically, if I cast it to iSaga, I can get the state, and it will give me the value back. And when I set it, it will try and cast it to the state that my actual Saga is. So if it doesn't allow that, it'll break. Hey Amal, how are you doing? Good day. No worries. So, quick summary for your benefit. In the YouTube chat. I have implemented more of the Saga from yesterday. I've got it to a point where it's almost working, or it almost should work. I haven't hit F5 yet. I'm just kind of refining the state part of it, in so much as I want to validate that this is necessary, or which pieces are. So I created the layer for the SQL Server persistence of the state, added those pieces in. We're going to get to complete in a minute. I was just reviewing the asynchronous nature of it. And I've added the service collection extensions in. And once this works, I will split this out as an actual library on my GitHub, and I will make this place public. Once it works. So in theory, I'm close. I just got to figure out this part, right? So the problem here is why you can't be private, you can't be internal, because I have to create you from outside. Or do I? Yeah, because you have to have public visibility to have that, right? That has to be public. Dogs are arguing with one another. But that hides. Okay, I get it. It's because it's called state, and I'm just using the variable and the name all over the place. I'm being dense. I'm not re-implementing this. That's referred to as registration state. It's healthier. Now in here, do I still need this? Yeah, I still need this. Tenant registration saga dot registration state. No. Okay. And so that's that. The naming bugs me there. Good morning, Thorolf. How are you? Get some rest. So yeah, I don't like this because it kind of implies that there are different types of state available in this thing, right? It visibly implies, oh, this is the registration state, there must be something else. So if you're not sure how it's working internally, it kind of makes you think there might be something more there. So, you know, there's an opportunity for misuse of the API or misunderstanding of the API. You can't misuse it. Okay. Saga. Overslept. Yeah, sleep's good. If you need it, you know, that's what your body does for you, right? Helps you sleep. Helps you rest, recharge. Okay. So, in theory, this unit test would pass. So what I'm validating here is that I have retrieved the Saga with an ID, right? That I have changed the state, and that I have hit save, right? That's all that's really testing. Let's see if it actually runs. Came with some co-working. Oh, nice. Nice. Okay. So where is it failing? It is failing at line 23 in the Saga. That would make sense, right? State equals new. That base got put there because of my refactoring. I made everything inherent. My apologies, you're about to see a 2-minute ad break, I believe. So in Twitch chat, I enabled the ads so that it removes pre-rolls. And I've hit the number where it will remove pre-rolls for the next 40 minutes or whatever. So people get into the stream faster. Okay, so I don't need to, I can discard these. So I don't assign anything, right? I do need the company name off this one, but in these cases, I don't need to, yeah, I need the event, right? But I don't need the actual variable assigning for tracking that data. So they can be discards, right? I could, to make this a little bit easier, I could actually also do state dot equals true, right? It'll aid in the readability, I think. And yeah, that one is perfectly fine as a method. So let's see if that now runs. There we go. I checked all the boxes. It runs. Let's ship it. Okay. One more change, right? Asynchronous. So I think it's reasonable to make on save async. So what that would involve would be we'd need to do a task and pass in a cancellation token. We might as well, if we're going to do it, we might as well do it properly, right? Provide the cancellation. That means in here, async task. No, on save, sorry. Right. There's the challenge. Okay, so my Saga save needs to become asynchronous to support this. So Saga persistence, this needs to be task, and we'll pass cancellation token, default, right? And now in our Saga persistence, that's obviously going to have a knock-on impact there. This code is fully able to be asynchronous, so I'm not panicked at making this change. And it's probably a good change. So we can await, and then we can await async there, and then pass in the cancellation token. Rider gives me some nice prompts. We don't need to make everything async, right? Save changes async, cancellation token, yeah, await that. So that will break some code up here in so much as we have this now, so this becomes async task cancellation token, right? And now this can await properly, and we can pass in the cancellation token here, which means all this has the ability to be properly handled. I don't think this is a bad change, right? It will break now in, actually it won't break. So we can await and pass that in. We can make that async again. And now we don't need to do that, because now we're actually awaiting stuff in there. So we don't need to do a return now. Only when there's a task to be awaited at some point. So this will work. Similarly here, we need to do that's already, so we need to await that save. I'm not going to change them to be async. I'm not going to put the word async there because there is only one signature and it is asynchronous. Microsoft have kind of shifted a little bit to that style sometimes, and other times the older APIs, they still leave async in there, right? So I'm not sure how I feel yet. Just sticking async on the end of everything that's asynchronous seems like an extra word that is unnecessary. And because of, I mean, when this was around, first around, await and async weren't as keywords. So now you can visibly see that it's an asynchronous method, right? I'm not messing around with that one. Okay, so that means that we would actually publish our event. This is going, what happens is, what's going to happen rather is, because of the way the underlying handling of the notifications works, it's essentially going to make whatever receives that user was verified an asynchronous process, right? Because it's going to say, okay, well, here's the events, and it does them in order, right? It doesn't do them in parallel. It does them in order by default. You can actually re-implement, or you could in Mediator. I don't know if you can in Mediator, but they both have that same concept of the notification and the handlers subscribing to it. But yeah, it will make whatever received the last event a synchronous. Everything will be chained off of that, so it's going to take as long as it takes there. But it should work fine. Okay, so we have our Saga. So I guess our first events are going to be here. Oh, we didn't make the Saga. We didn't make the Saga changes here. We need to make them. Otherwise, our Saga is going to be sat there doing nothing. I really can't do this anymore. I really shouldn't. I have to register a user. Otherwise, it's going to break. I'm going to leave it in there for right a second, but it's not a solid thing to leave in there because it's not something I want in the long term. It's a thing to stop hitting Auth0's APIs. We're going to get our Saga persistence. We're going to get our user was registered. Yeah. Single default. The difference here is this user registry, right? I need to provide task is user registered, queried user identifier, right? Because if that user is already registered, right, hold on. Maybe I don't need that in here. Maybe I make that decision somewhere else. Maybe I should make that decision in here. So let's go to the workflow. So the workflow is the chain of events that come together to register the new tenant, right? Because as I've said before, a mediator, it's not advised for a mediator to inject a handler to inject a mediator to pass forward other messages, right? It's not like the intended design. The problem is sometimes you need to call multiple handlers because they have, you know, responsibilities. And that chain of events needs to go somewhere. So traditionally I would put them into a handler that would receive the, you know, start this piece. In this instance, I've created a separate concept. And again, it's kind of trying to aid in readability and ease of understanding of the code, right? So if I say it's in a workflow, oh, we go to the workflows directory, right? If I say it's in a workflow and it's hidden inside of handlers, you have to go and hunt for that and start digging around and see what that does and how it's chained together. Here, this is a simple recreation of the pattern of command handler, right? But I've just termed it workflow, the same way I've done with Sagas, right? Because it just helps me express. There's more to just register a new tenant than create a tenant, right? There is register the new tenant and register the tenant user. And in each case, register the tenant is here's register this tenant, now publish the event, right? Those are two actions that should be performed. But this register new tenant is solely concerned with creating the tenant, and then the event is a separate component of it, right? And similarly, the register tenant user, same thing. So the challenge here is in register tenant user. So another benefit, by the way, of using this pattern, the way that Jimmy Bogard suggests with Mediator. If you do it this way, so rather than having when I first came to Mediator, I'd do this. I'd do register new tenant command, right? And I'd have public class register new tenant handler. This would be iRequest, right, of result or whatever. And this would be iRequest handler of register new tenant command, comma, result, public. So from the actual code where you invoke Mediator, you would do mediator.send new register new tenant command. Name equals Bob, right? If you control click on that, you get this. You actually then have to go and search for how it's used, right? So if you put in, the copy and paste is sometimes acceptable. If you switch this around a little bit and do it this way, and we call that, instead of being so explicit, we can just call it the command, right? So this takes a register new tenant handler dot command, and that here is just command. It starts to clean up the readability of this code. This is self-contained. You can't have one without the other anyway, right? they are a one-to-one. They're meant to be a one-to-one. You're not meant to swap out the implementation of your handlers in any other way, right? The intention is it's a command that's sent and assigned to a handler. So if you do it this way, when you do this, new register new tenant dot command, and I have some patterns that I've been experimenting with around that, right? When you control click on this, you're taken to the handler. So it helps a lot with the navigation of the code, the readability, the maintainability, right? So that's why I do it that way. So now if I want to go and see the handler, I can click here and I know that I'm going to see the handler code, not the command. I don't have to control F. I don't have to, look for usages, right? I am that much faster. So what I do here is I retrieve the user, right? By email. So if that user exists, I have a user, right? I then try and get the tenant for the identifier that we passed in, and I add this user to this tenant, and I return the user identifier. So whether I created them or I got them, that user is, I do not know in here that I created the user or not. I just make sure they're there. That might be something I reflect back on later, right? I might review that and say, is the better pattern to put that into its own workflow, right? Because then it's, okay, does the user exist? Yes, let's register them with a tenant. Otherwise, let's create a user and then let's register them with a tenant, right? It's a little bit more explicit. This is hidden behavior, right? Because I've actually created a user in this. And it's kind of, what? The user wasn't there. It's kind of, it backfills the system. But in the same, what that does is also hides the behavior, because this is register tenant user, not create a user and register with tenant. So I'll probably review that. But anyway, for the sake of what I'm doing right this second, this user comes back here. This is why we spend time prototyping, thinking through it, and making sure that we can change things quickly. So this user comes back. I don't know whether they were created or they were just assigned to the tenant, right? I get a user is success, and now I have a user identifier. Technically, this isn't wrong. This event is still correct. A tenant user was registered. So I don't care in here that I created or whatever the user, right? I might care in terms of breaking it out in terms of workflow. But other than that, I don't really care here. So I am still going to need to publish tenant user was registered, which if I do that, the current challenge awaits, right? In that I have to say, does the user exist in the registry? And if it does, update. So it still moves that responsibility into here. This, I don't like doing to-dos. Really? No? What? Disallow? When did I get that on there? Didn't identify can't be null. That's a lie. That's what happens when you let it implement code for you and don't review it. Break out user exists, user create, and register tenant user. Almost, yeah. Because again, I don't like the fact that there's a hidden behavior in there, right? You'd have to go, how did this user get in the system? Oh, it's in registered tenant user. I like to be a bit more explicit. It aids in my ability to maintain the system. But I don't want to get bogged down on that because I really want to get this piece working, right? The problem is I just need this. If I want this workflow to even remotely be testable, I have to get this piece in, because then this piece will allow me to put all the pieces together, create the endpoint for user was verified, and see the Saga fire. Or not. Right? I haven't hit F5 yet. I'm building this on pure guesswork. So I do need to look at this and say, bool is user registered. GUID user identifier. I will come back to that one as well. See, some of these things in here, right? Let's think about this from the work perspective of someone else, right? So, PM comes to me and says, "Hey, I need to add a user into the system. When we add them, we should register them with a tenant, and we should be able to say, okay, now make sure they're in auth 0. That's all they're going to know about, right? They're not going to know about the intricacies of what those possible events are. It's why it's important for us as developers to create workflows that we can quickly review. If I try hide behavior, if I try and move things apart around, right, and oh well, this kind of does this, so let's put it in there, right? And there's now unintended side effects of things, or there's pieces of code that don't quite do what they say, right? It's harder to find. So when it comes time to review it, you have to make changes. If it's wrong, you should document it, or at least highlight it and review stories before you start working on them, right? Don't just go into a story with some vague outline and then try and achieve it, because what will happen is you'll have said, oh yeah, that's just adding this, and then you realize all these side effects, all these pieces, right? So I'm going down a complete rabbit hole here because I've made some initial decisions in my prototype that now I'm thinking back over and reviewing and thinking, well, if I leave that sat there, it'll work, but it'll create a mess for me down the line. So my point here is user registered? It offered me tenant identifier there, right? Which made me think, well, hold on, is the user registered with the tenant, or is the user registered with auth 0 outright? What this code does in register user with provider, if I go to the implementation, what this does is tries to find the user by email. This is an actual search against auth 0, right? This says, hey, does this email exist? If the user is null, right, we register a brand new user. If it's an update, right, i.e. we've got a new user, or we've got the same user, we exist, then we update it. So this is wrong, right? Again, this is telling a lie because it's hiding a behavior, right? Register user with provider. What I'm doing here is saying, oh yeah, that's just, it's just an event that can happen, right? We can just put it all in there and it'll handle it. So what I now need to do is break this out, right? So I need to do this. String email. Do I need to do it that way? Do I need to do it that way? Yeah, I find the majority of bugs appear because we make wrong assumptions about code. Yeah. I'm a big proponent for if someone gives you a job to do, argue. Argue with the requirements. Make sure that they see the way you look at it, right? Don't start shouting. I'm not encouraging shouting at someone to get your point across. But what I'm saying is you need to make sure that you figure out as a developer, how do you effectively relay, here's the cost of doing what you're actually asking me to do, right? And be open to discussion, debate about it with your colleagues. But you should review the requirements and make sure you understand. And writing code that is easily maintainable, writing code that is clean and readable will aid in that, because you can look at the code base and, oh yeah, that does that, and you can trust it because you've built these standards in place. Good morning, Deflux. Hello again, Doctor. Missing requirements is usually where my bugs are most frequently. Yeah. I'm currently imagining working in a very clean code base. Ours is cleanish and I'm happy to have it that good. No code base is perfect. There's always something you change. There's always something that is, kind of did that quickly, right? But if you make a sacrifice, either be prepared to go back and change it or write it in a way that you can live with it and you can review it later and wrap it in a unit test. Do not do what I just did. Do not leave them sat there. I'm not joking. I have come across so many of these recently where it's like, to do. I'm not joking. That comment is almost perfect, what it was. Right? Don't leave them in there. Right? If that's a problem, that's something that you should raise and bring up to PMs and say that we have an issue here. We cannot ignore this. Right? So you don't leave to-dos scattered through your code. Fix problems. And the more you work towards a clean code base, those problems will get a little easier to maintain. Nothing worse than running into a 5-year-old comment saying code is broken and doesn't elaborate why or how. Yeah. Or I wish I could do this better. Maybe, I don't know. I don't use to-dos all that often. I would imagine it does. Yeah, there you go, to-do. And I clearly have some. That's deliberate. Nice. Rider highlights not implemented exceptions as to-dos. Yeah, it does. Yeah, it does. I think it does give you warnings before you can commit, but it will warn you and tell you there's warnings. I also have Solar Lint installed on the other machine, which also does some stuff there as well. So anyway, my point. That still needs to live there. I do need to come around on that. I just have to make sure that I identify it. So we're going to break this out now. Update user with new tenant, right? GUID user identifier, GUID tenant identifier. Bool make current equals true. No. Yeah, I want that as a default. Oh, because I've got cancellation token. There you go. They're kind of helpful if you're coding something up and don't want to forget to do something, just put off. So you put to do add telemetry or whatever, and then if you forget, the reviewer can catch that sort of thing. Yeah, I'm not saying there's no need for to-dos. I'm just saying you really shouldn't leave them in for things that you know you need to fix, right? Those are things that you should raise. Make sure the story's put in. Make sure they're handled and they're documented, because you know at the point you're doing that, right, that there's a problem and it needs to be fixed. You might have actually identified what needs to be done. So at that point, rather than leaving it to do in the code, you should work with the PM and get them to put a story in to track it and set the criticality of that story and remove your to do, right? Because you've documented that it needs to be done, right? The story's there. You don't have to leave comments scattered through the code base. Because what you don't want to do is you don't want to leave lies in the software. Usually I punt the non-critical stuff. Yeah. But, and again, it's your code base, right? It's if it's you on your own, like me, I'm making these decisions as a sole developer right now. A year from now, this actually could be a product. If I bring other people onto it, what do I do then? Right? Am I proud to show this off? I am to some extent because I'm streaming it, right? I'm showing you guys, here's what I'm doing. I'm not afraid to take the criticism, but in the same, here's how I actually write code. So you got to live with yourself, and if you're proud of what you do, it will show. A lot to do, so you do not have to. Yeah. So, you know, if there's any questions over this, if there's any opinions on this, right? If you don't agree with what I'm doing, I'm happy to discuss this sort of stuff, right? It's cool to debate it because it allows you to think through it. And if you have to defend something and you actually find yourself arguing about it, likelihood is you're probably wrong somewhere, or you don't understand something, right? I get to pitch TDD internally in a presentation. Any advice, tips on doing such a thing? Try to find where the biases lie against it. You might go in to pitch it and find there's no bias and they're happy with doing it. Do you have a demonstration ready of how it would apply to the code you're working in? Because if a code base does not have TDD in there, right, are you pitching it as a concept? Are you pitching it as, here, I think we should be using it, and here's how I would use it? Right, so I got to make sure I read the comments because obviously it's now on YouTube as well, and I'm not putting it to the screen. I was going to tell my story of how I got into TDD. That way people get perspective on the work required. Yeah, I mean, yeah, share experience. I would say that, you know, if it's me, you know, you've probably learned by now, I learn better with pictures. So demonstrating here's how it would apply would allow me to see the benefits a little bit better. But yeah, absolutely. I would say share the story. Try and get ahead of some of the negative comments, right? I mean, if you guys just think for a second, what are the negative comments that people are going to come up with unit testing, right? My apologies for those on an ad break. I will wait to continue that conversation. Just going to start fleshing this out a little bit. Implement missing members. Okay, so again, for those watching on YouTube, if you have any questions, you want to join in any conversations, please feel free. As always, I am more than happy to divert. I wish Twitch gave me the ability to do an actual effective poll of how to use ads properly, because it feels really horrible running them. But if I don't run them, it's just like I don't control when they run for people. It bugs me every time. I just feel dirty. I promise you, I'm not getting rich off ads running. Okay. So, yeah, I'm not sure what to work into the story of the how to do it. TDD makes refactoring harder. TDD isn't possible because I don't know what code to write. Unit tests don't catch bugs. Yeah, finding common sticky points for people and refuting them might be a good idea. It takes too long. is pretty much the number one argument I've ever heard. It takes too much time. So if you listen to Robert Martin, etc., talk about unit testing, they talk about treating it like production code. I think about it, right? Okay, so I need to make this change right now. Right, I can't make it in this class, but let's say I want to make a change to this implementation of this yeah, I've got no unit test around that. I want to change this handler, right? Register new tenant. Actually, yeah, register new tenant. Tenant user was registered. Right. I have a unit test around this. When user does not exist. No. I just skipped over that test. It's fine. I obviously commented it out for a reason. Good idea. My point was going to be, okay, well, I need to test this. Well, I know what I need to do, right? So I'll just do it, and then I'll test it. That's a good way into testing if you're thorough enough. You do have to change your kind of mindset as to how you code. And if you treat TDD as production code, the test you write as production code, then you should be a little bit more rigid about it. Oftentimes showing is the best way, right? And it's a little hard to just demonstrate on the fly. And you might want to separate, okay, there's unit testing and there's test-driven development, right? And they're not the same thing. Because unit testing, you can go and add unit tests after the fact. And in fact, with my work stuff right now, that's what I'm doing. Right? Because TDD is a little hard because I have no idea what I'm doing in PHP most of the time. I'm kind of learning it as I go again. So I'd say you need to be prepared to demonstrate it, to fight the arguments, right? Why does it make refactoring harder? Why isn't it possible when you don't know the code, right? As you're seeing, right, on this, I'm exploring this code as I go, right? If I'm writing a unit test for this at the same time, I'm doing the same thing. I'm just coding it as I go. Like, oh, I could do this. And essentially, the Saga stuff yesterday, right? I was prototyping that code out. I could have been writing unit tests around it, right? The only reason I wasn't is because I didn't know how to necessarily apply the unit test to something that was so vague. But if I showed the discipline, I could have done that, right? So I would say it's worth trying. So yeah, I would be prepared to demonstrate more than I would be prepared to just talk about it, because there's going to be a lot of there's going to be a lot of pushback if they've not done it before or if they're scared of it. TDD is only possible if I know exactly what I have to write is another one. Yeah. Again, a lie. It's kind of a misconception that you have to know, right? Deflux. Oh, I'm looking through my code. There's so many to-dos, and they are so bad. There's a try catch here with in the catch to do. We need to do logging. So we are hitting that try catch, and nothing is happening. A swallowed exception, just what you need. Yeah, tackle misconceptions, prove them wrong. Again, I had a colleague in my previous place. He was the just buckle down and get it done type, and he and I sat down and did some unit testing once, and then we got a bug come in, and I said, recreate the bug using the unit tests. We went off and modified the he got the data, validated that the test didn't catch the bug, added a unit test to catch this scenario that was happening once he'd identified what the problem was, got the red light, fixed the bug, and ran the tests and got all green. And he has not stopped unit testing since. He will not write code without unit tests unless it is under complete duress. Yeah. And Deflux, you should probably put some logging in that try catch. Okay, I need to. I've done another stream and I've not even got my code building yet, so I need to find some days off so I can do some longer streams. Okay, so what I'm going to change here is I need to put in something like that. So let's go look at the Auth0 docs. Satolic's stream. Okay. Why is that screen? Either my glasses are completely fogged up or that screen is really dark for me today. It looks perfectly fine on stream, but on my actual screen, it is super dark. So my big issue with YouTube so far is I have no issue with the dual stream. My CPU is ticking along at a very low rate, 1.3%. My GPU's taking a little bit more of the brunt. But discoverability on YouTube is definitely not where it needs to be. Just looking at the statistics. Okay. I cannot read most of that screen. Awesome. Docs.auth0.com. No, auth0 management API docs. Let's do it that way. There we go, that's better. To lighten the screen up a little bit for myself. So users, get a user. Okay, so I can do that. And it will return a 404 user not found. Okay, so. Yeah. Oh, this is too washed out, whatever. So I need find user by email. I need get user by ID. And again, let's be consistent, right? Let's make sure that I'm being clear about what I'm talking about. I'm always talking about identifiers. Whenever I'm using the GUIDs, I'm talking about identifiers. So the API endpoint looks like v2/users/ identifier. And I want to send the get. And if it's not success code, I do not want to throw an exception. So if response dot is success code, return true. Return null. No, return. Yeah, get. I'm not saying find user, so it doesn't return. Yeah, we'll worry about that design afterwards a little bit. So if it's a success, right, it's going to be a 200 level response. Then I'm going to get the content and pass back the user. Right, that's great. We got the user. Otherwise, if response dot status code is not found, return null. Right. Otherwise, throw user by identifier lookup failed. Right. There's nothing more to that than that right now. So one thing you won't see me do is wrap a lot of these in try catches, which would be the safer way of handling HTTP requests. HTTP requests are generally not going to be 100% reliable. So good practice is to make sure any network stuff is unreliable. So the good practice will be to put try catches in here. What I tend to do is not put them in early and assess the need and which level they should be at later on, right? So I will come back over the application as I test it and identify if there's any problems there. But I won't just add the try catches everywhere, right? So is user registered? That needs to be task of bool. Okay, I've got to look it up because value task versus task. Which should I use and when? Okay, he's a very trustworthy person. I'm pretty much sure he wrote the book on asynchronous. So methods may return an instance of this value type when it's likely the result of their operations will be available synchronously and when the method is expected to be invoked so frequently the cost of allocating a new task result for each call will be prohibitive. There are trade-offs to using a value task instead of a task. For example, while a value task can help avoid an allocation in the case where the successful result is available synchronously, it also contains two fields, whereas a task result is a reference type is a single field. This means that a method call ends up by returning two fields worth of data instead of one, which is more data to copy. It also means that if a method that returns one of these is weighted with an async method, the state machine for that async method will be larger due to needing to store the struct at two fields instead of a single reference. Further, for uses other than consuming the result of an asynchronous operation via a wait, value task result can lead to a more convoluted programming model, which can in turn actually lead to more allocations. For example, consider a method that could return either a task with a cache task as a common result or a value task if the consumer of the result wants it as a task, such as to use it in methods like when all and task when. The value task would first need to be converted into a task using it as task, which leads to an allocation that would have been avoided if cached. The default choice of any asynchronous method should be to return task or task to your result. There we go. I'm going to go with that from now on. And worry about performance analysis later. Okay. Because mediator uses value task everywhere. It does not use that. So we're going to do if get user by identifier, and I probably need to pass in a cancellation token, blah, 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 blah. Cancellation token, default. Is not null. Cannot access non-static method. Public async task pool. What? In static context? How the heck am I in a static context? Oh. Okay. Line wrap for the win. Oh, overflow for the win, right? Okay, so what's going to happen here is with that in place, now my workflow, now my tenant user was registered. So this I need to change to my other pattern as well, I think. Tenant user was registered handler. I need to do if registry dot is user registered await user dot identifier cancellation token, right? Else do that. So if the user is already registered, we need to update the user with tenant, right? Because we're going to, in this scenario, for this to have happened, my email, I come in, I'm registering another tenant, right? Because I'm a consultant, I'm setting up companies, right? It's a big product, everyone wants peace. Then a consultant comes in and registers organizations. That email will then be on multiple tenants. So that's this scenario where someone is using the same email to sign up for multiple tenants. They're going to get added to these other tenants because they're signing up, right? It's not like you can use it to sign up for an existing tenant, so it's not like you can, get into the tenant on the back door and like, yeah, there we go, I've done it. So in this case, this scenario would be await registry dot update user with tenant, right? And it is updating the user record with the tenant. It's not updating the tenant with the user. The system will track this. True cancellation token. Make current there. What I'm going to do in here is I'm going to put the logic in to say if it's make current, then the current user tenant will be set to this tenant, otherwise false. That way I can actually use the same method. Well, do I want that, or do I want to always assume? This makes it an explicit behavior, but it's a Boolean argument. Do I imply that by update user with tenant, it always becomes the most recent? No, I'm not going to jump. I'm not going to jump to that right this second. We're not going to mess with that piece. Let's remove that. Again, because it's going to hide some behavior, it's going to make that a little harder to follow. Okay, so now some of this comes out of here, right? Because this doesn't have to happen. This doesn't have to happen, right? Ta-da, that's it. Register user with provider now does register user. Makes sure we're authenticated. This is where aspect-oriented programming would be good, right? Because I want to always validate that I'm authenticated on every request. Okay. So, register new user. I got some warm tea brewing. Got a non-programmer question. Where do you leave the thermostat at? I like it, so it's just warm enough. So like 68 in the house. That's nice and comfortable. Any warmer than that is just like too hot. The room I'm in right now is like really warm though. I've got the heater in here set to 68 and it's not been on for a while. Okay, so update user. So this takes an auth0 user, right? And it needs this because it's going to 72. Oof. It's way too warm. Okay, so you and I are almost on the same temperature. Yeah. Okay, so update user with tenant. What we're going to do is var user equals await find user by email. Actually, we don't need to find the user by email. We can do get user. No. I'm getting a little upset because I'm like, I'm going to call that, and then if they exist, then I'm going to call this and get them again using the same method. It's okay. It's okay. We can do it. Right? And then we just need to do update user. So if user is null, right? Throw new not found. Ooh. Include my Couchbase library into this layer. See, if I wasn't paying attention, it's the perfect error, but it's in another namespace. I don't want to pull that. That's where the tooling hurts you, right? That's where automatic inclusion of libraries hurts you, because a less experienced developer, or even an experienced developer, because I could have happily hit enter there, right, is going to make that mistake of including that because it makes sense. Because in this instance, if this happens, if I get to update user with new tenant, I should assume that I've already validated that the user exists. So here I'm just making sure that the user can't be null. Right? Throw invalid argument. We're going to go with argument exception right now. I'm not getting into the whole custom exceptions piece right there a second, because I want to do another pass of all this using open telemetry. I want to find someone who knows a lot more about open telemetry and see if I can't get a discussion as to how to do it rather than guessing through that piece. Because to me, it's all just logging. And I'm like, I'm just logging it. It's fine. I don't like logs because no one ever reads them. On open telemetry, they are, but I'm talking more about how to actually apply them, right? What are effective use cases for some of these things, right? Because like I don't like just sticking logs in my code because I don't use the logs, right? If I've got a problem, I use a unit test to identify it to prove the problem, or I can debug it quickly, right? I'm not saying logs. So telemetry and logging kind of in the same bucket, metrics, etc. Metrics will be useful, right? Metrics, I will have to learn how to implement them and what the right path to do it is. But actual logging and telemetry and stuff like that, yeah, I just like to find someone who's actually effectively used them and have that discussion. But how often do you go reading through your logs? Can anybody honestly tell me they sit and look through their logs routinely? And if so, why? But the telemetry data, you're normally things like how many users or which pieces are being called, etc. Those you've normally created dashboards for to represent that. Exceptions, you're looking at the error rate, right? So even if I stick, you know, a global logger on this, right, and log out all exceptions, okay, but in my actual code, what does effective logging look like? How do I layer that in there? What I'm seeing is the more code bases I see, the more I'm realizing that I just like being minimalist about things, and sometimes I think that's against me rather than for me, because I think I make things too simple sometimes, and you know, yeah. But anyway, let's finish this one. We can do it. We're almost there. I promise. So anybody watching that hasn't been here before, feel free to ask any questions. Feel free to join in. There's no pressure. You know, I'm happy to discuss this and review what we're working on. Okay, so now we have our user registered. We have our update user with new tenant. So this workflow, this handler now starts to be a little bit more representative of what it's really doing. I'm not hiding behavior. Register user with provider does exactly what it should. Update user with new tenant does what it should. And now the benefit of this is, after all that, right, var saga equals await saga persistence dot retrieve. That doesn't need to be awaited, does it? That's not an await sort of call. And then notification dot tenant identifier. I apologize for ads for those on Twitch. Tenant user registration saga dot registration state. Oh, come on. No. That was me relying too heavily on the tooling and not paying attention to what I was doing. I tell my people to log everything. I love how ads play and then the viewer numbers jump. Okay, saga.handle notification. Right, and then saga persistence.save is going to be cancellation token. The little message that pops up in Twitch stream then actually said to me, your ad stream ends in -1 seconds. Yeah, I tell my people to log everything. But what do you log, right? What is if you're logging deliberately, what do you log deliberately, right? Okay, breaking out metrics from telemetry and general logs, right? Ultimate, yeah. Breaking out those three things, right? Telemetry I can get that understanding the usage of your application is key, right? But I think that is a sort of story planning piece where you decide, here's the things we need to know about, right? Metrics, number of users using the system, requests per second, all those sorts of things, absolutely, completely get behind, right? Number of new tickets created per hour, those are metrics that I can benefit. But general logging, it's a tedious task that I don't understand. Generally, there's some process when there is a crash, we will go through the code and see, oh, there's a log there, and we see if the log got hit. Right, you're using logging as debugging. Right? I've noticed a lot of people, right, and definitely JavaScript world, right? Oh, is it getting here? Okay, log dot right, I am here, right? And those get left in there. Drives me insane. Okay, so we now have this piece, which will fire the Saga. We have the Saga from the tenant was registered. We have the user verify, right? So in theory, this should run. Who is ready for me to be very wrong? And I kind of want to test this part. Okay, I'm going to test it. Because I said it should create. Okay, so let's see if I am. Now, I have not run any of the Saga stuff yet. So if it builds and starts, that's step one. Awesome. I don't think it will. Oh, there we go. There we are. Okay, step one. It built. It did not create the table. But I don't think I've created a single instance of the database yet, so... So I have the code in the Saga stuff, in the Saga persistence, in the DB context. In the context, ensure created. But I have not initialized an instance of the Saga yet. So here we go. Okay, so project number, amazing. We have to password is going to be yes, that is inspired. Okay, so we've registered the tenant. This now explodes. Okay, I'm not going to put a breakpoint. I'm just going to accept the exception. No service for type tenant registration Saga. I was wondering if I need to do that. Let's do it by hand. So in here, I was like, is it going to need it? So what I need to do is add transient tenant registration Saga. I'll need to put in some sort of code in the add sagas to go and say, hey, go find sagas in this directory or whatever. but it built, it started up. I call that progress so far. It got to the point of actually trying to get the tenant. So the problem there is I actually ended up with amazing in there. So I've created the tenant, and I probably got the user as well. No, the user failed because the user is not added until the tenant registration completes. Again, talking about the notifications, they happen in sequence, right? So it doesn't happen. Project number wonderful. Let's go. Invalid object name sagas. Okay. So I use the same connection credentials. So there's some pieces in here that you might actually see. So the migration service. Someone suggested I think I have copies I need to go see, so I'm going to take a quick... Oh, it's almost... Someone suggested doing this, creating a service that runs and pretty much ends immediately. I don't know how I feel about it. But let's try migration service. Stop and build. So that would start up a background task, which would then go and initialize the database is the idea. You should be able to do this, but that might be on model creating. I need to do that, not there. What I want to do is obviously when you create it, it should establish itself. Right? It shouldn't need you to run a script or do something else. Oh. Looks like I did something. But it didn't do anything. I will be back momentarily. I need to go do a puppy break. But yeah, be right back. Okay. My apologies. Okay. I'm back. Okay. So why didn't that do what I wanted it to do? It looked like it ran something, but that's not what I was looking for, right? And next question is, did it hit what I wanted it to hit? Create DB context from the factory, then ensure created. No problem. I was watching the state of the Unicorn entity framework. What's changed during the break? Huh. How was that? Okay, so that's not running. Why is that not running? Didn't find the associated module for the breakpoint. Okay. Ensure created DB context EF core. How and where? Going to the below. The custom configuration. If you're using migrations. So far, the MS Dev is like, this is an MS advice, but just use the latest nightly in your app all time. Yeah, no. No. Do not use latest nightly in a production application. No, unless you are seriously ready for. So that sort of advice suggests that they don't get enough testing and verification of things. So if you're running nightly, you could be putting bugs into GitHub the next day for them. Yeah, no. But there's no, so log to debug dot line. No, console dot line. Bit noisy, but we'll see. Yeah, I would not be using nightly builds of software. Add hosted service, migration service. This just does not get configured. So I'm not even going to do this. Right? We're not going to run that. In here, public protected on configuring database.ensure created. Let's see if that changes any behavior. Because I need it to, I don't want to get into, oh, just run this script if you copy this package, because you know, if this is useful to anybody, it would be nice if it is self-contained. Tenant management. So tenant management should trigger it. Not there. Let's try and create next. An attempt was made to use the context instance while it's being configured. A DB context instance cannot be used inside configuring, since it is still being configured at this point. Lesson learned. Protected override. We know it didn't. We know it didn't go in there, right? On model creating. When is best to use? I just don't do this all the time, so this is. I'm not using migrations. I don't want to use I don't need to use migrations. I just need to run ensure created, which will use the table. I mean, I could put it in. Right, I could put it in here. Right. Hey, look, I put a logger in there. I could put it in there, but that feels unnecessary, right? I should have it. The database should be in a good state where the persistence is going to work. Any of these? If you want to keep using, then running your own script after the call is the way to go there. There shouldn't be any downsides. Blah, blah, blah. And DB context. Nope, it's not even mentioned in there. So the reason it doesn't initialize is because obviously I'm using the factory so that I don't get the context until I need it. Let's assume it'll be there for right this second, and I'll worry about that part later. So I just need to recreate the table, right? So let's go in here. Sagas, right? New column, ID, int, not null, identity. It is my primary key. New column, orchest. Just do it. No, you want to. It's a unique identifier, and it's not null. And it's an index, and new. I'm gonna have to configure that stuff anyway, right? So, and then state, which we determined was better as nvarchar max, not null. That can be null, because that doesn't matter. Okay, so Sagas is there. Let's run it once. We've got to the point of trying it, which I didn't expect any problems with. It clearly tried to inject it, and it clearly tried to use SQL, so it definitely inserted the SQL Saga persistence. So does anybody that's been watching me do this have any opinions or thoughts on what I'm doing? Do you feel this is necessary? Is this an approach you would or wouldn't take? I'd be genuinely interested in knowing how other people feel. Okay, user by identifier lookup failed. Holy moly. We got a Saga. I mean, it didn't do that properly, but we got a Saga. That piece actually worked. Pulling the Saga and actually creating it actually worked. I mean, of course it worked. I'm a professional. Why wouldn't it work? Is tenant registered? True. Nice. It failed the alter part. No, I don't. That isn't auto. I should be inserting that. I'm probably not inserting it. I don't want it to populate that. That's not a generated thing. Yeah, I'd put new ID. That is because when I retrieve it, if it is not null, when I store it, I do not. Oh no. Oh, it's because. I don't know why it is. It's an orchestration ID. So it's this. There should only be one in the database at a time for this to run technically. There we go. That's why I need it. This is the GUID of the tenant right now. So I might have to have another key on here that is, I mean, I've got a unique identifier, but right now I have nothing stopping me from pulling two sagas for the same thing. I've also never used the where thing either. Yeah. So there is a unique identifier, but I probably do need to add the type on there eventually. If I get to the need for a second saga, which would be my true assessment of is this actually going to work. So the problem here is I'm creating it, right? And then I'm checking, right, if it's not null. If it is null, then instance dot no, I don't care if it's null or not. Instance dot state is that no, it's saga is not null question mark or it's new state. Instance of state saga is not null, then use the deserialized version of saga state, or new state if that comes back null, or new state, right? Yes, I am. I'm not going to query it. I'm not using it. It's just pure data storage as a proof of concept. That's my missing part. So my orchestration identifier on the instance, there we go. There's my challenge. So I don't want to change the orchestration identifier. I do not want to allow you to change the orchestration identifier of a saga, but I need to get you an instance of the saga. Or the constraints, the generic constraints. So this allows me to make sure that I'm working with types I can control rather than having to check the types time and time and time again. Yeah. So the problem here is I get the required service. Huh. Oh, design challenge. This is bad, right? I can't control where I access this, right? Yeah, in this instance, when I'm retrieving, I'm saying, okay, I'm going to retrieve tsaga tstate, where tsaga has to be a class, and it has to be iSaga of tstate, and the tstate has to be a class that I can new up, right? So this is kind of adding to this, right? Then I'm allowing myself to be able to create a new state. So I know I can create a new one of them, right? And it allows me to work with this generically without having to wonder. And the serializer, the JSON is being serialized out of the database string, but it knows because of the type it's working with what it's going to deserialize as. So I can trust that it's going to deserialize cleanly to T state. The problem I have right this second is I have a chicken and egg. You should not be allowed to reset the orchestration identifier of a saga. It's kind of internal to the saga, right? So it's kind of a constructor issue, right? I wonder if. I wonder. Can I do? can I do public static protected? If I implement an abstract constructor, though, I've got to provide other constructor. I still need to serialize it. This is like a reverse overload thing. Yeah, kind of. I'm constraining the parameters. What I'm trying to think about is, can I, and I apologize for those in ads for a minute and a half, can I construct an instance of the Saga from the orchestration identifier? But that doesn't really change the problem, right? Because the problem is that I need to pull an instance, but I need dependency injection to work. I can't put a private method in here, and I am certainly not using reflection to do this. So I need a different pattern for initializing a Saga, right? Because I would need to, so here's how I would need to do it, right? I would need to put a constructor on here. Could do private Saga GUID orchestration identifier, right? And that would set my orchestration identifier, right? Then create a public static Saga T state, which would create and that would, that's private. Cannot create an instance of the abstract class, right? So I'd have to create that as an abstract. Can I do an abstract static? Is that even a thing? There's not a thing. So I'd have to create some sort of factory to initialize that. And then I would have to go and get the dependencies and inject them separately. So close, so close. The quickest fix to do it, right, to make it work, is that. But that is really bad practice because I can't control access to that. And yes, I'm the only one using it. However, that doesn't make that behavior any better, right? Because now it'll work, right? If I truncate that table, I had an error before. That's the point. And I'm almost out of time. No. Why does this happen? Why do I get into this when I'm? Oh, the users sending that request failed. None handled exception occurred. So that failed because there's my GUID, right? If I go to auth 0, yeah, I'd have to, right. ID of the user to retrieve. Yeah. Yeah, I need to set the API token to be able to use that. So anyway, I think what I will do is I will make that horrible change right now and have a think about how do I protect this, because this should not be settable. You should not be able to change the orchestration ID once you've initialized the Saga. But the Saga has dependency injection requirements, right? So how do I do that? That's going to be a challenge. Unless I create yeah, I need to put it in. I could put it as a parameter, but then dependency injection isn't going to solve that for me, right? I'm going to be stuck still. So that's another challenge. But anyway, I'll get this working. I'll have to test the user was verified off stream because I do not have the ability to hide my screen effectively right this second, and I'm not messing around with that right at the end of the stream. But in theory, this is working with some minor tweaks, right? We did get a Saga, right? We did get it in there. We just need to set the identifier that will allow us to retrieve it. So we know that retrieving and setting that initial one worked because we got to retrieve, we populated the state, and then we saved it back to the database, and then we went to try and retrieve the user, which would have been the next step. So I will continue on this. I will finish this up. So tomorrow will not be a Saga stream. It will be continuing on with the application development. Can we raid a fellow vegan? Oh, another Rider user. Awesome. Yeah, we can do. Yeah. Oh, it's a loud stream, is it? Okay, so I will happily raid over to somebody, but yeah, thanks for the warning. Be prepared. You're going from a quiet stream to a Rockstone, a streamer without a mic. Let's have a look. Spanish. They are working on database stuff. Yeah, I will happily raid over to somebody. Not a problem. But for those in here, be prepared. As says he's no mic and music, and I do not have any of that, right? So, well, I have a mic, barely. So, yeah. So thank you for joining me. I will return tomorrow. We will do more. I will kind of figure out this Saga stuff, get it tightened up, and be ready to move on to the next steps, which will get this auth0 process verified. So the ending of the saga, right? I suppose I'm creating a saga out of a saga, and then move further into application development, adding some extra pieces in, and start to build the stories around what it looks like to have a user sign up for the system, and start to actually build out the behavior, and have a discussion around what it is to start an MVP. So thank you for joining me. I appreciate it. For those on YouTube, for those on Twitch, I appreciate it. And I will be back tomorrow. And yeah, thank you. Take care.